Where was it that you?
Las Vegas,
But which hotel?
at the Aria.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Brand
Oh,
new.
that's fancy. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice conference. Good morning, everyone. This is the Public Affairs Roundtable. I'm Dave Crouch, and this is the Williamson County Chambers, or affectionately known as Williamson Inc.'s monthly show to discuss all things related to public affairs in Williamson County. Specifically, these first 4 months of the year, we always focus on the state legislature. And this morning we have with us Senator Jack Johnson, Representative Charles Sargent, and Representative Glenn Cassida. And we hope that Representative Jeremy Durham is not far behind you, Glenn. And welcome. The session ended in rather record time this year, didn't it, Jack?
It did. It did. We, especially if you consider that this was the beginning of a new General Assembly. So typically at the first year we have a reorganizational period and of about 2 weeks. We had the governor's inauguration, and then we had a 1 week special session to consider Insure Tennessee, and then we lost the better part of 2 weeks due to weather. So really, I think if you crunch the numbers, we finished about the same time as last year, but with about 4 fewer weeks altogether than we had last year. So we're trying to be efficient.
Is it just because there wasn't as much to discuss this year, or did you just choose not to discuss?
No, there was a lot to discuss. The last 2 weeks felt like 2 months.
Yeah.
So, well, it looked like everything ended on a positive note. Everybody seemed to be compromising a little bit, and that's good, since we hadn't seen any of that out of Washington. Your role models up there hadn't been giving you much to go on, but glad to see it happening here in Tennessee. Don't know if you got my emails, but yesterday I was kind of curious as to what you all saw as the 3, say, top accomplishments of the session. Starting with you, Jack, what would you say this year were the most important things y'all got done, or that you saw as maybe stopping?
Well, unlike if you read the Tennessean, you don't get a very accurate representation of. Did I just take a shot at the Tennessean? I think I did.
No.
90 seconds into the program, but believe it or not, we did have a very productive session, and obviously the budget, which I'll defer to Charles on because he is chairman of the House Finance Committee, but we passed a good budget, and always, of course, constitutionally required to pass a balanced budget, which we did. Cut taxes again with the Hall income tax, raising the exemptions. We do hope to get rid of that tax at some point. That's a conversation for another time. But in the Commerce Committee, we had some significant legislation dealing with Uber and Lyft, ride sharing, which is, and believe it or not, Tennessee is leading the nation in terms of passing comprehensive statewide regulatory legislation for this new technology that is really emerging. I've used it one time. I'm proud to say I feel very trendy. I've used Uber one time, but it is becoming very popular, and in a lot of states this has been a real knockdown, drag out. But obviously we want Tennessee to be on the forefront of welcoming new technology and new business, so we passed good legislation for them. In the Commerce Committee that I chair, we always have a lot of legislation between doctors and insurance companies, and in terms of provider payments and that type of thing, and we had some good legislation with that. So all in all, keeping Tennessee a good business-friendly state.
Great.
No, I mean, the budget, naturally, my biggest concern is the budget, and we had an excellent budget. This year we had some what I call one-time money. It's money that we'll collect once and probably not collect again. We had a big company on the F&E tax, franchise excise tax, that made a one-time payment of roughly about $140 million, and not expected to receive, the following year. So it's just the way it worked. And then we had a settlement. The Attorney General had a settlement, and that was about a $40 million settlement. So that was like one-time money And I think the governor did an excellent job. I know people may have all different mixed emotions on the State Museum, but we have planned on a State Museum now for the last 10, 12 years. Never had the money. There was never a will to bond a $150 or $160 million project for a State Museum. The governor looked at the opportunity and decided to put $120 million of that one-time money and pay cash for the museum. They're going to have to raise another $40 million in private funds, and they'll have about 4 years to raise those private funds, 5 years to raise those private funds. So we'll actually end up with a new state museum over by the Bicentennial Mall.
Wow.
And be about $160 million that we'll actually end up paying cash for. So
That's exciting.
that was a major
Yeah.
discussion on what to do with all that money. Teachers, we did a great job I believe, on the teachers this year. The BEP, we funded approximately $150, $160 million additional dollars. All the teachers will be receiving a 4% pay raise. Then there's some equity money in there for some teachers that are under the base pay in different counties throughout the state. We put money in there for that. And we picked up, long story, teachers used to be on a 10-month contract. And then we switched them over for salary-wise to a 12-month contract, but we only paid their insurance for 10 months. And so this year we picked up the 11th month, but just picking up the 11th month of the insurance was $29.6 million.
Ouch.
Our group insurance for the state is one of our big expenses. We pay out about $1 billion on health insurance for all our state employees, our teachers, and everything of that nature. So that's
It's crazy.
yeah, I mean, when you think of $1 billion all of a sudden, just on health insurance premiums, so we're always very careful because when we take a 3% increase, that $30 million increase, we're taking, we have to have the revenue to pay for that. So, those are some of the highlights. I mean, we can go into more. I know
The earlier, there was apparently a real problem with franchise and excise taxes. Did we get that resolved? Or?
we got that resolved. We've gone to, without getting technical, to a 3-to-1 ratio on the franchise excise tax. This year, it will raise about $16 million. In the year 17-18, it's expected to be about $46 million in new taxes. We had to work with the telecommunications company. I'll use AT&T. They were going to get hit disproportionately of that money. They were going to end up paying about 28% of all the money we raised.
Right.
And it wasn't right. So we worked with them. Then there was another big discussion, debate on what I call the cloud-based programs.
Right.
And how they tax, where if you go in and buy a program in a store here, you pay a tax on it. But when it's over the internet and over cloud-based, you do not pay a sales tax on it. So we had to work all that out. So it was Commissioner Roberts did an excellent job working that out, working with all the parties, all the different companies.
Right.
And basically, 98% of the people were very happy with it. There's always someone that's not going to be happy, but
Right.
98% were very happy with the bill.
Now, on the BEP, the Basic Education Plan, I understand there were some changes that benefited Williamson County. Is that correct?
Well, there were 3 things. Well, like I said, on the health insurance, the $29.46 billion we put on health insurance, that was equal to an $800,000 increase for Williamson County. So they just that one line item was equal to $800,000. And I worked very closely with Dr. Looney and Rogers on that. So that in itself is like a penny property tax increase.
Right.
And we also, besides that, with the pay raises, doing the 4% pay raise, the state will match the 4%, and normally the county will match it on the local funds. Right. So if we gave no pay raise and the county gave a 4% pay raise, they'd have to pick up the state side and the local side. So that was worth a couple $100,000, in itself.
Good.
So overall, I think the BEP was funded well. I think we helped Williamson County out. We're one of the fast-growing counties, so we never keep up the way they pay on the BEP.
Right.
But we did get some extra money. I want to say it was $380,000, $400,000 on a BEP for the growth money. But we're always behind on a growth money, just the way they pay that. So overall, I thought it was good. I think our school system came out, great on that side of it.
Right.
But we don't pay for bricks and mortar, so
Right.
the locals pay for all that.
And what about the Halls tax? Exactly what happened there? What was the change?
Well, I had two different bills. One was to lower the Halls tax rate from 6% down to 5.5%. The fiscal note on that was about $16 million, and they're afraid about losing this revenue. And then also, the other one was to raise the exemptions for those over 65. Presently, the exemption is $33,000. So if you had an income, single income, 33 and below, you didn't have to pay the Hall tax. Even if you was exempt.
Right.
We raised that for singles from 33,000 up to 37,000. Then we took a couple and raised a couple from 59,000 up to 67,000. Okay. So a couple making 67,000, and that's total income. That's just not Halls. That's total income. So if you had a retirement income, Social Security, at Halls, if you're 67,000 and below, you would not pay the Halls tax.
Right.
So, and that was not a big fiscal note. It was about $1 million fiscal note. To locals, it took a little bit away from locals. The way I looked at it, Williams County was going to lose about $21,000, so it was not a big loss to a local government. So,
Right.
And we're just trying to chip away with that every year, and
Right.
it just depends on what you can get passed and how much revenue you're going to spend on when you reduce taxes. But I think all of us sitting here, when we raise taxes, we also want to look on the other side of the coin and also reducing taxes on our constituents.
Right.
So it's just a balancing act of the
Right.
of the budget.
Okay, gentleman from the 63rd District, Mr.
63rd.
Cassida.
East Williamson County. East Williamson County.
What do you see as the major accomplishments?
Things that we're proud of, and as Republicans that we're proud of, that we were able to either pass or turn back, because sometimes it's not what you pass, it's what you do not pass, and it's what you defeat. And we've got some legislators that have the opinion that if we can take more of your money, we'll do a better job of taking care of you. I disagree with that. And so the Republican majority in the House and Senate, our governor, was successful in keeping state government small, keeping your taxes low, and devolving that authority and that power back to the citizens of the state of Tennessee. And to me, that's an accomplishment. Washington is forever intervening themselves and taking and separating us from our own money, and things get worse, and you don't see that in Tennessee. The other thing I think we ought to be proud of is pretty good advancement on the penalty phase on crime and punishment in the state. DUI, fines, jail time was increased, and especially in sex trafficking. We really addressed that this year as well and made that some very stiff penalties, jail time for engaging in that kind of behavior. Education that Charles and Jack expounded on so well, we emphasize that, and not only the K-12 but the higher ed, and the governor has a drive to 55, which is trying to get 55% of the state's population with some college, either a 2-year or 4-year degree. So those are just a couple of things that proud of, and we're doing it right in Tennessee, and I wish Washington, D.C. would kind of mimic us here in Tennessee.
Great, good, thank you. Mr. Durham, good to have you with us.
And on time.
And,
If Jessica made you breakfast, you'd be 5 minutes late too, Casta.
what do you see as the major accomplishments?
I think our budget invested in education. I was one of two Republicans who did not vote for the budget last year, but I thought this year it was very clear that education was a priority. And no matter how we may differ on this, I thought it was a big deal that at least for this year we did not pass in Tennessee. There's too many question marks. We're talking about increasing entitlements with borrowed money. I know we're going to have people on different sides of that, but you had the special interest and the liberal media on the other side of that, and I was very proud to see my colleagues do what they did on that. We increased the rainy day fund. It's almost back to $600 million. This was a good year to do it, and we did it this year. I would like to see us get a little bit more serious about the high income tax. We did do some things this year, but I thought it was a perfect opportunity to do more. And we just passed pro-business legislation. I thought that was another theme, kind of like how that education money and the budget was a theme. There was a lot of very pro-business legislation, many of which it wasn't really as drastic a change that maybe it would take to get in the media. But like I know one bill that we all voted for, I carried it on the House side. It was just talking about just generic med-mal claims, like 99% of the time in a med-mal case, you're going to have the exact same defendants. But what will happen is even passive investors will get named in lawsuits. And then you have to go through discovery and $50,000 in legal fees later, then you can motion for summary judgment. So we've just decided that we're going to say who's going to be named in those lawsuits. And if you want to add somebody in, you just show up to court, make a reasonable showing to the judge, and they'll add the defendant. But I think that will help control the rising cost of health care, and I think it will keep people out of the courts who don't need to be there. But I thought we passed some good legislation this year, but those are the highlights that I saw.
Great.
One last thing, Dave, that we should have touched on, that is of great concern to a lot of folks in Williams County, is repealing Common Core.
Right.
And we did that. We did it in a responsible way. We're gonna unwind that. We're gonna unravel it, but I think in a responsible way that's not gonna leave us without standards. But we're gonna put a process in place to create Tennessee standards that will be good quality standards for our kids, and that was significant. So.
How long is that going to take? What's the
Over
process
about 2
there?
years, about 2 years. The governor had already started it through executive order by putting a commission effectively in place and allowing for a website portal for parent and teacher input into the standards. That process will continue. And then the governor and the two speakers will appoint a body made up of educators and parents and stakeholders and so forth to redevelop these standards and probably keep some of the better standards that are in place now, even under Common Core, but get rid of some of the others and allow for a very thoughtful and deliberative kind of process. And that's the whole process probably over about a 2-year period of time, I think.
Yeah, they'll take each subject matter, and so this year we're doing science, and they'll be creating a new set of standards for science. Next year will be math. The next year will be English language, and next year will be so yeah. To Jack's point, it's on a track to right Tennessee.
Yep.
I understand.
But
Yes.
between now and the time the new standards are written, do we have any standards, or are we just?
What's in place is in place, and
Okay.
so those will be used until this committee, this commission is reappointed. And again, they already started, or will start working on science just real soon, and that'll be the first one to be replaced.
And on a parallel track with that, Dave, is very important, is obviously to have the testing be aligned with the standards, and that was another issue too, because we're really holding our teachers accountable, and we should be, but we need to hold them accountable for what we're asking them to do. And so you've got to have this assessment on a parallel track with establishing the standards.
Right. The where did we actually end up on guns in parks? What was the final resolution of that issue?
I'll
Well,
take it. Well, no,
Yeah,
Jeremy.
well, go ahead. You start, Jeremy.
Basically, you cannot take your gun in a park in the immediate vicinity of a school activity. That's it. Because we had the issue about our school activities on government-owned property, which I believe we took care of that. We had the issue of people who perhaps were already in a park and then a school activity started, or you had just a very large park and you didn't know the school activity was going on half a mile away. I feel like if you say school activity within the immediate vicinity, then people are probably on notice, and you're probably not going to have people stumble into the criminal justice system who don't need to be there. So that was the language we used. We'll see how it works for a year. If we need to fix it next year, we will. But that, to me, seemed to clarify the concerns that I heard from my district.
Yeah, and it's just kind of from a historical perspective. Remember when we passed I guess 4 or 5 years ago, we passed to allow carry permit holders, and keep in mind, that's who we're talking about here, are people who have obtained a carry permit. And we allowed them to carry in state parks. And that's when we allowed the local governments to opt out of that and continue to enforce a ban. And we all supported that, or Jeremy wasn't there at the time, but I didn't have a problem with the local opt-out. But I will tell you that our colleagues in the General Assembly, from a constitutional standpoint, and that the General Assembly shall regulate, the use of firearms, that this was a train that was heading down the track. So, and we're unique. The vast majority of cities and counties in Tennessee did not opt out. Now in Williamson County did, City of Franklin, City of Brentwood, so forth. City of Spring Hill did not. Yeah. So you had some inconsistencies across there. The section of the code in 1309 and the title that has this language in there relative to schools is still there for property that's owned, used, or operated. That's the language that that Jeremy was referring to with regards to the immediate vicinity of a school activity taking place.
Right. Vouchers, are they dead?
That's a harsh word, dead.
Nothing ever dies.
Nothing ever dies.
It just stays around.
It's in sub now, finance sub, Charles?
Back in finance sub.
Okay.
The vote was not there on the regular voucher bill to take it out. It was basically tied to 7-5. It all depends what day you took a vote count.
Right.
6-6, 7-5 against it. So it was just a very moving target, and the votes were not there to bring it out of the subcommittee or bring it into the full committee. Okay. In the full committee, probably had a little better chance than the subcommittee.
Right.
Just because of sheer numbers. In the subcommittee, you only have 12 members. Full committee, we have 22 members. Yep. So you have more of a diversity on the full committee.
What Charles is saying is right, and what's ironic is last year it got out of finance sub and died in finance full, and this year it seemed like the opposite was true, that it had a stronger shot in the full than the sub. And we're pretty much talking about the same bill that we've talked about for the last 3 years. So I cannot attempt to explain why that's the case. The committees are a little bit different, not a lot different. But that what he's saying is exactly right. That's the way I perceived it too.
I mean, it will vary from year to year, and who's on that committee.
And who's getting pressure from who?
And who's getting pressure from who, or the school boards back home. Some like it, some do not like it.
Right.
It's all over. Really all over the board as far as that's concerned. And, and the part we were hearing a lot, all of us were hearing a lot from our constituents, and the thing, it was hard for us to get across to people here in Williamson County, it was never going to affect Williamson County.
Right.
But still at the same point, people were saying they just didn't like it, but it was never going to affect Williamson County. It only affected 5 counties. Right. And those are the bottom 5%. And I think Jack, in our first meeting, gave an excellent job on, what do we do with those children in a failing school that are trapped in there, right. And is that fair? Yeah. So, but it was only going to be the 5 counties.
Right.
And we would never be, because it's the bottom 5%, even the bottom 10%. Well, we're the top school district, so right. It was never going to. I mean. Unless something drastically happened 50 years from now, it'd probably never affect Williamson County.
Gotcha.
And this is a good place to kind of touch. I mean, most of my emails that I got are my friends on the left side of the aisle that oppose vouchers and charters. And I think that in our everyday lives, we're not forced to go to one store to buy a commodity. We have options. We have choices. Right. And that's all we're doing here with charters and vouchers, is allowing parents and the taxpayers the option of getting their child out of failing schools that are not doing well. We should be child-focused, not bureaucracy focused. In other words, what's best for the institution? That should be secondary. What's best for the child? How do we make sure that child gets the best education? And if they're in an entity that's failing, then it's time to change. You don't reward failure. You reward thinking outside the box and doing something different. Right. And so that's the general theory behind both charters and vouchers.
Right.
Right. And our state constitution is a little bit different than the federal constitution. We actually must provide an adequate education for these children. When we raise our right hand, that's the first thing we do when we take office. And there are children in Tennessee who are not getting an adequate education. And none of us, I don't think, have the stomach for vouchers in Williamson County because there's not really a reason. But there are some districts where it's not safe to go to school. If you're in the bottom 5% of Tennessee, I mean, I have a very big heart for some of these children that I feel like don't really have a chance in life. So we're talking about failing districts, the worst schools of the worst. We're not talking about Williamson County, but there are other places in the state that have nothing like the education system we have, and that's why the four of us have been more sympathetic towards opportunity scholarships, vouchers, whatever people want to call them.
And by the way, the bill passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. So.
They just pass things out and, you know, we study a little bit more.
There's another bill about in-state tuition that passed the Senate too, but we won't talk about that one.
I didn't vote for it.
Special education funding, there are some changes to the IEP funding change, and I know until I had kids in school, I thought that just applied to kids with disabilities, but it also applies to kids that have a special talent of one kind or another, typically very high intelligence. What's changing there this year?
This was geared more towards those children that had special needs, and they now have a debit, if you will, or an amount of money they can now take as a parent. And if the local school is not providing speech therapy or insert whatever therapy they need, parents now have the option of going outside the school system to find an instructor or a service that helps benefits their child. Once again, it's kind of this thought of let's empower parents. They know what's best for their child. They know what their child needs, and they know where best to go get it. And so that's what this did. And it was a very intense debate. A lot of the rural counties just don't see that they have any skin in the game because they're in rural areas. They have no place to go. But I think it was a good move on our part. It was a good step of empowering parents.
And they limited it to 7 conditions. I mean, it didn't open it up for all disabilities. It was limited to 7, and then you also have to have a certified, if it's a speech pathologist, he'd have to be certified by the state.
Yeah.
So we didn't just have people using the money. It was more like a debit card where you had to, you, the parent, had to pay for it front, and then you'd be reimbursed by the state. I think the dollar amount was $6,450. So, you know, even if you looked at a speech pathologist, if you took your child twice a week at $100 a time, you can see that, you know, that'd be $10,000 just on that one disability.
Right.
So, you know, the parent's still going to be expected to pay quite a bit of that.
Right.
The $6,000 would go, but you know, that would leave the parent, you know, $3,500, $3,600
Right.
to pay. And a lot of people were afraid of the person that would take the money, the $6,400, like a homeschool child. The parent would just take the money and not give the service to the child. This is why it's on a voucher. This is why it's on a quarterly basis, and you have to really pay for it up front. Then we'll reimburse you on a quarterly basis. So they just can't take that money and stick the $6,400 in their pocket.
Protected from abuse then.
Correct. And that's what we're trying to do. And, you know, I think we'll see some more tweaks to it in the next year, 2 years. But I think that we put all the safeguards we possibly could into the bill.
Right. Okay. Jeremy?
This whole school choice phenomenon is interesting. We just talked about how that the voucher bill was stronger in the full this year as opposed to the sub last year, but the special needs bill that when they're talking about, that got 52 votes on the House floor. I have never in my short time as whip seen a vote where that every single person, when we went around and counted, voted exactly that same way. And people are either okay with it or they're not. And if you look at the video and listen to the comments, it's totally ideology, in my opinion. You had people who were saying, why should a child do this? Why would any parent do this? I mean, those people were arguing that the government should decide for them. Then you had the other people saying, well, if it's my child and I want this, basically it was just down the middle. You either thought that the government should make that decision or you thought the parent should make that decision. And I think that's why people were ingrained in their positions. And just look at the video on the House floor. It was just two competing political philosophies. Either you think the government should make the decision or you think the parent should make the decision.
And it's such a big discussion because the BEP formula and their budget is a very large portion of the budget. Our BEP funding now is at $4.2 billion. So, I mean, it's another expensive line item when you're looking at the total budget as far as that. So that's why there's always a lot of good debate, I think.
Right.
But it's when we look at the total picture of all the children, that's a very big line item in our budget.
You know, the legislature is a good study because even though it's heavily dominated Republican, there's three different groups in the House. You've got the urban, which are predominantly Democrats, and they believe in big government and pretty liberal on the social issues. You've got what we represent, the suburban Republicans, which are predominantly focused on business issues, though we are conservative on the social. But our issue and our importance is economics, low taxes, small government. And then you got the rural Republicans, which are the largest group, actually. And their emphasis, they're very, very conservative on the social issues. You know, guns, life, those things are the most important, though that we can usually drag them along on the financial matters. Yep. And it's just an interesting animal, especially when you go try to count votes or get something through finance, through commerce. There's a little deal making every now and then.
It's interesting.
That's really interesting color.
Because like vouchers, you'll see the suburban folks and the urban folks a lot of times on the same side. And a lot of the Democrats haven't come over yet, but they're going to have to eventually. Especially some of the folks in the Black Caucus that have a lot of charter schools. They're going to have to come over at some point. I mean, their schools are just too bad. They're going to have to do something. But what Glenn's saying is exactly right. Like if you look at who brought the Guns and Parks bill, if you look at who brings the pro-life bills, they're always the folks. And we vote. We vote with them a lot, but they're from the folks in the rural areas. But like I talked about that the healthcare liability action bill about the named defendants. We typically bring bills that will focus on creating jobs that will we want to improve education, but also we want to keep spending low because remember, Williamson County, we generate much more revenue than we take back from the state. So those are the issues we typically focus on. But I think Glenn nailed it. Those are the three groups. You've got the rural folks, you've got the urban folks, and you've got the suburban folks. And we find ourselves identifying with both of those groups at different times.
Well, and when we look at economic growth here, both Mayor Anderson and Mayor Moore and Mayor Crosby, a big deal to a rural area is if they have a little company come in and they create 40 jobs. That wouldn't even get news around here if we had a company coming in. We have companies increasing their workforce by more than 40 at any given time, but that's a major, major thing to some of these rural counties, these small counties. I mean, 30 jobs is a big thing, and here, I guarantee you, we have companies every year increasing their employment by over 30.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's we've discussed health insurance ad nauseum on this format, but a couple of and the Insured Tennessee is dead for this year for sure. But this federal cutting of funding, what's going on there that I noticed in the news here today?
I can only speak of it topically, and maybe these guys can help me drill down, but the feds are just evaluating, and curiously enough, just those states that did not expand Medicaid, and they're just going to review how those states are spending the federal money on the uninsured pool. So it's an inquiry is probably more of a fair term of what they're doing. I just find it curious that the Obama administration is only looking at states, I think there's 4 states, Arizona, Florida, Tennessee, and I can't remember the 4th one, that haven't expanded Medicaid. And I think Commissioner Gordon and the governor, I pretty much said it, it looks heavy-handed at a minimum. It looks heavy-handed by the Obama administration, that if you're not going to expand Medicaid states, maybe we'll inquire, if not cut, if not pull away those funds for the uninsured individuals of the state of Tennessee. That bothers me, that this administration would play that kind of game.
Right. Jeremy?
There's a way the federal administration could enroll some of these folks in Medicaid. If they would allow us to put reasonable cost controls on our existing population, the 1.3 million folks who are already on the rolls, I guarantee you we would agree to use those excess funds to put more people on the rolls. The problem is, if it's truly an entitlement and you don't have to even worry about a modest copay and you can't be kicked off for not paying it, people will use it. You never know how expensive healthcare is until it's free. You just need people you want them to use the healthcare, but you want them to think about what they're doing. You don't want the cost to just continue to rise. If we have our private health insurance, whatever you're on, you have a copay. You have to think about what you're doing. You don't want the doctor just to run tests just for the sake of running tests. So if they would just allow us to put modest cost controls on our existing population, I believe you could cover most of the Medicaid expansion population that we're debating. If they would just allow us more flexibility on our existing TennCare program, we could cover most of the people we're talking about. But they'll never do it because they want it to be an entitlement.
Well, and they want the control, Dave. That's the big issue. And Governor Haslam spoke to this in his State of the State, or it may have been when he addressed us regarding Insure Tennessee. And he was sitting with the National Governors Association, and he said that in all his years of as governor now, it's his 5th year, sitting in that room with the President of the United States. And inevitably, every single year, the question about block granting, and remember those 2 words, block granting, you're going to hear a lot about that as we lead up to the next presidential election. And I'm proud to say that I have had the opportunity now. Well, actually, Glenn asked one. Mm-hmm. He asked Governor Scott Walker, and I asked Governor Rick Perry, if you're elected president, will you block grant these dollars back to the state? Because here's what happens now. What, Charles, 45, 46, some odd % of our state budget is federal money, meaning it's money that we first send to Washington, and then Washington sends back to us, whether it's education, roads, Medicaid, healthcare, so forth. And every one of those dollars comes back with strings attached to it, meaning the federal government is telling us how to spend our own money in our own backyard to take care of our own people or to run our own state. And it's very, very frustrating. This is a component of the entire Insure Tennessee conversation that I don't think has gotten nearly enough attention about the reticence that we experience in dealing with the federal government. So the big push, I think, over the next year and a half or so, as we approach this presidential election, at least on the Republican side, is going to be, give us our money. Give us our money and let us make our own rules and policies. And if they would do that, and keep in mind, with Insure Tennessee, the Obama administration reluctantly agreed at the 11th hour, December 5th to be exact, of last year, a month before we go into session, they reluctantly agreed to some of Governor Haslam's demands with regards to this Medicaid expansion population. Why won't they let us do that with the existing Medicaid population? To Jeremy's point, if they would let us use our own money that we're first sending to Washington to take care of this population, we could put in cost control measures, very reasonable, common sense cost control measures that would allow us to free up enough dollars to take care of at least that additional up to 138% of the federal poverty level. So this is a big conversation. The state of Florida, Governor Rick Scott, is suing the federal government because of this heavy-handedness that's taking place. And back to that conversation with Bill Haslam, our governor, and the President of the United States, Governor Haslam, and you can go watch the tape and see Governor Haslam telling you this. He asked the President, Mr. President, why won't you block grant this money down and let us take care of our own population? We know what's best for our people. And the President said, we don't trust you. We don't trust you. It's a direct quote from the governor of the state of Tennessee. So what does that tell you about the federal government? They don't trust states. They don't think we're smart enough to take care of it. They want these Washington bureaucrats telling us what to do with our roads, our schools, our health care, and so forth, and that has got to change.
Plus the fact, you have to remember, we talked about a bill. There was not a bill out there. It was all ideas as far as that's concerned. But you could not pick up and say, okay, I have a 100-page bill here, and I can read it, study it, and figure out what it's going to cost. There was no such, it was all, trust me, and there was no bill out there.
You like your insurance, you can keep it.
You know, and that was scary. I mean, just to think you're going to vote on something, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, and you really could not look to see. We had ideas what the deductibles were going to be, what the co-pays were going to be, but there was nothing in there. If a person didn't pay his co-pays, they were going to be kicked off the plan. So I could have a co-pay in there, but I don't enforce the co-pay.
Exactly.
It doesn't do any good. So without, you know, after 60 days, if you
That's
don't
not a
pay,
copay.
but I mean, it was all over the board on some of it. It was just language out there, but no one can sit down and read the language.
Dave, to summarize this, and I know we need to move on, but Insure Tennessee would have been the largest one-time expansion of government in the history of the state of Tennessee. We had about a month to consider it, maybe 2 months. We're talking about billions of dollars being borrowed from our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren that the federal government doesn't have. And we're asked to enter into an agreement with the federal government that looks at our governor and says, we don't trust you, but you trust us.
One more subject that's near and dear to my heart before we turn it over to the audience. But what about Mac Hatcher? Did we make any significant progress on the funding of Mac Hatcher? And
Where is Mac Hatcher?
Is my catcher close to my district?
Is that the 65th district?
it
Charles, I'll let you start, and I'll go after you, if that's okay.
No, actually, a good
need a
part of
second.
Mac Hatcher is in the 61st district. It may service the people in the 65th, but I mean, the road actually is going to be.
Well, I guess you should get it done then.
there are two sections of it that are still 2-lane, gentlemen. Don't forget the southeast quadrant.
I understand. There was nothing. I have not seen the new road list. My impression is not going to be in the 3-year plan. And part of it is the funding. The federal government right now in the highway fund, they're giving us 90 days worth of money. It ran out a month ago, and they extended it for another 90 days. So it's hard to plan. It's hard for John, and John does a great job. Commissioner Crowe does a great job, but it's hard for him to plan $100 million. Well, this project is about $75 million project, not knowing if we're going to get the federal money or the match money.
Right.
And it's very, very difficult. So he took about $400 million worth of projects off the table, and just because didn't know if we were going to have the money to fund it.
Right.
Now, but I will
Do you
say,
see a theme here, Dave, about the federal government and federal money, our gas tax money that we're sending to Washington?
Let's opt out of the federal gas tax and just do our own gas tax in Tennessee.
I tell you, to that story, and it's the dilemma we're in as legislators. But I was in Nolensville Saturday to pancake breakfast. 6 guys sat around just talking about life in general. Roads came up. Congestion in Nolensville is every bit as bad as anywhere else. Right. And I said, guys, the simple answer is to increase the tax on gasoline. What do you think? Of those 6, only 1 supported that. Yet they were complaining about congestion being so terrible in Nolensville.
I understand.
And that's the dilemma that we 4 are in right now. So we've got to come up with an answer. What is the answer? It's got to be an answer where the people of Tennessee agree with.
Jeremy,
I'd like to go back to that road. I forget the name of it. But I'm going to go a little bit further than Charles did. I agree that there are some challenges, especially at the federal level with transportation funding. But I think it sends the wrong message from TDOT to the locals when you've had people who relocated from their homes because of this project. And the thing is, like Mayor Moore, we don't agree on every little thing, but the local government has played ball on this. And it just sends the wrong message if we continue to kick the can down the road when I have no idea how the state delegation could have been more reasonable and worked harder to make this happen. I don't know how the local government could work harder to make this happen. I mean, people have moved from their homes to make this happen. Like, if this does not become a very high priority very quickly, I cannot justify telling someone that they should play ball with the state government as far as road projects go, because we have done everything we can, and this project needs to happen.
Well,
Now, let me say one thing on the roads. Franklin Road is in the 3-year program to widen it from Concord Road down to Moore's Lane.
Yeah.
And Concord Road over towards Millerville is going to be completed, and they're working on that now. So
Right.
there are still a number of road projects in Williamson County.
a few green shoots here and there.
It just,
Right.
some people don't agree with where they're going.
Depends on where you live. So
There's always a list.
Yes.
let's get the audience's participation here. If you've got a question or comment, if you will, step up to the microphone and identify yourself and go ahead.
I had to text myself my questions. I'm sorry, I'd be reading from my phone here. First of all, thank you so
And
much.
your name?
Excuse me, my name is Patty Stranch. I'm a constituent of Representative Cassidy and you too, Senator Johnson.
Thank you.
My questions are, you have made statements recently indicating that, one, the voucher bills do not affect Williamson County, and two, that you supported them because you wanted to help children in the schools in the bottom 5%. How do you reconcile these statements with your yes votes on the IEP voucher bill that absolutely applies to Williamson County and that have nothing to do with the schools in the bottom 5%? Does this mean you will continue to support other voucher bills that do affect Williamson County next year? Thank you.
I'll start. Yeah, I do. I believe in taking authority away from bureaucracies and giving it to parents. Now, with that said, when it comes to actually taking vouchers to leave Williams, or for children to come from out of the county to this county, I adamantly oppose. But we got to get away from this plant like the Soviets did, where we make one car, it's a Yugo, or actually it was Yugoslavia made that, it's a Yugo, and that's the car you use. I think we need to give more options to parents. It's your money. Why do we want government telling you this is where you will go, and this is how you will conduct yourself, and this is how you will live your life? So I'm a strong proponent initially on failing schools, and let's see how that does. Just how I feel about it.
And let's be careful we understand. I know that, and I'm probably the one who's the worst about it, saying that we don't want vouchers to affect Williamson County. Well, let me clarify that. If people are coming in to Williamson County, that's more money in our school system. It would be if people left. I don't think we want to do anything that would hurt our school system. If it was something that would actually help our school system, then that's one thing. The other point I want to make is that the schools are so bad in the bottom 5% areas that if we did not show some type of sympathy, I believe it would send the wrong message to other parts of the state that Williamson County, we already have that stigma because it is a great place to live. Everybody knows it's safe here. It's, we have great education. We have a great economy. It's a great place to live. But we have to make sure that we're demonstrating that we care about other parts of the state. So that's part of it. We have to be very careful in our rhetoric about education issues because ours is so good and other children are not getting the opportunity that they get here.
And keep in mind, too, Tennessee is a very diverse state. We have 95 counties. We talked a little bit about the rural versus suburban versus urban areas. We can't live in a bubble. We cast votes that affect all 6.5 million people in the state of Tennessee. And the needs in Hancock County, a very poor county, are very different. So lest someone try to accuse us of hypocrisy, I think that we've been very clear here that we're going to do the best we can to accommodate the needs of these kids in other parts of the state, and and do the best we can to mitigate the impact on Williamson County. We do this all the time, not just on education issues, but other issues as well. We're elected to represent this county, and very proud to do so. And that's our first interest to our constituents here. But we're also setting public policy for the entire state. And the frustration, whether it's traditional vouchers for the bottom 5% of schools, performing schools in the state, or whether it's for special needs kids. Our two districts in Williamson County do an outstanding job of providing services for special needs kids, Franklin Special and Williamson County Schools. They do. But Hancock County Public Schools does not do a very good job. And so we're giving an option to parents in Hancock County or Perry County or Smith County, you name it, that's a very rural district that doesn't have the resources to provide the speech pathology needs for that kid. And so we're going to give the parents of that child an opportunity to take their tax dollars and go get the therapy that they need for those kids. In Williamson County, it's not going to be utilized, probably very, very rarely, because our districts do a good job. So why should we sit here in Williamson County and deny the parents and the children in these poor or inner city counties, or inner city school systems, the right to provide what's best for their kid? That's the difference. So I understand, I've gotten emails calling us hypocrites and saying we're going back on our word, but I think we've been very, very consistent.
Right. It wouldn't make any sense for, I don't understand how there'd be a situation where that someone would think that in FSSD or Williamson County that there was not an adequate resources for their child who has a special need, and they then choose to leave Williamson County to get it. That blows my, if that were the case, then perhaps we should think about our vote on that. But my understanding is that we do a very good job on it, and people would only be bringing money into our system. That was the way I understood that.
Plus the fact we have 2,800 students that are in this group, and if a dozen students left our system, that would be extremely on the high side, I think. A dozen out of 2,800. I mean, you know, it does give that parent the right, but we do such a good job there again. But we have to look at the Hancock, the Lake, the Polk counties when we're looking at the overall picture for the entire state. I don't think we'll lose any children because we do such. I think if you ask the person moving to Middle Tennessee and they had a special needs child, wet school system, everyone would say Williamson County. We do probably the best of any county. So there again, you got to take a position, and I would love to take some people and bring them into inner city Memphis, Polk County, Lake County. You cannot, it's very difficult to understand, and I've told the story once before, in Polk County, the average value of a house in Polk County, this is going back 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the average price was $42,000. $42,000. Assessed value was $10,500. I mean, we got houses here with shrubs worth more than $40,000. And you cannot imagine these people living in a house, they're on supplemental Social Security and everything else. I mean, this is what sometimes we almost have to take ourselves out of the environment we're here in Williamson County and go to a Polk, a Lake, a Hancock. It's a totally different world. And maybe you're saying it's compassionate, but we're concerned about those children.
Let's
Okay.
leave
Excuse me.
leave a little more time for maybe another question from the audience. I'm fixing to call for recruit volunteers. Joe, come on up.
Good morning, Joe Jensen. I'm a resident of Franklin and Representative Cassidy's area and Senator Johnson's. I heard some press the last couple of weeks you were in session. You were spending some time talking about the state book, the Bible being the state book. In talking with friends and other groups, people are asking the question, why is the legislature, quote unquote, wasting its time talking about a state book? And so I don't know how to answer that question. And the second question I have related to that is I know the Attorney General came out with an opinion saying that what you were proposing, or what was proposed to have the Bible be the state book, could be deemed unconstitutional. There were some constitutional issues. Why, generally, would you not consult with the Attorney General before you even start having debate on a particular bill?
Well, we did, but number one, as far as the time goes, just like what we were talking about earlier as far as some of the rural areas that will bring bills, none of us brought this bill. I was one of very few Republicans who was not a co-sponsor at the end of the day. But when it comes up, we have to vote on it. It took like an hour. It actually failed in the Senate. But when people bring bills, we have to vote on them. The AG issue, what I understand the AG's position to be was that if you're promoting it as a religious book, then no. If you're saying it's a historical book, then yes. So what Representative Sexton did is he added language to the preamble saying that, and I'll be quick because it looks like we have 5 minutes, saying that we recognize it has historical significance. It's been proven in this situation, So that was the idea behind it. It wasn't something I was extremely passionate about. I just listened to my district. I was like, okay, if it's a historical book, most people cannot even name the raccoon as the state animal. I would rather us be talking about cutting red tape on businesses, keeping taxes low, making sure our schools are excellent. But we had to debate it, and I just listened to my district on how to vote. That was and it really wasn't one of those 3-1, 4-1 things. It was probably 5-3 for it. So I voted yes, but it wasn't anything that any of us just made a priority. Like, we've got to get this done for our district this year. I assure you we didn't spend any time on it, if that helps.
And I'll say this, we spend probably literally 10,000 man-hours a week on debating bills on all the various committees and time, and so this took up a couple of hours for the entire thing. It was fractional. But yet, some media outlets like to make it think it was more than it was. And don't forget, I mean, the Bible is the foundation of our Judeo-Christian ethics. We have in God we trust on our money. We open all of our meetings in prayer. It's just who we are as a society. It defines us as our moral common beliefs. And it passed in the House and failed in the Senate, and we moved on.
Yeah, well, actually, the Senate referred it back to the Judiciary Committee to contemplate the constitutional issues after the AG spoke to it. So it made it to the Senate floor, but because of the AG's comments, we did listen to the AG, and so we sent it back to the Judiciary Committee to contemplate those constitutional issues.
Mayor Anderson?
Mayor, I can ask this question. I know the speaker can. I have not seen the final details, unless Ken tells me later, what was the final on annexation and
Well,
You got Charles.
Let's don't get too deep in that.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Maybe
one-
too
one
soon
minute.
for Charles.
I'm going to let more people with
okay,
a calmer view on this whole thing.
we don't have enough time to cover it adequately, but I'll hit the high points. And as you know, the annexation by ordinance was repealed last year, and so we're coming back this year and trying to make as many accommodations as we can to help our local government. So at the 11th hour, we were able to provide for non-contiguous annexation. It provided there's an interlocal agreement with the county with regards to ingress and egress and so forth, and utility placement. I'm not saying that's going to help tremendously, but it's an arrow in the quiver so that the cities and the counties, in instances where they deem it appropriate, can annex non-contiguous property.
And for some, go ahead.
The other thing, because I know everyone had a keen interest, de-annexation died. It didn't come out of committee, so de-annexation, that bill died.
And let me say this: this bill came came out of nowhere, and for some reason, it just includes Williamson County. Imagine that.
Gentlemen, we'll wrap it up there. Really appreciate your participation. This is, I think, a great format for us on the local level to understand what's going on up on the Hill, and we appreciate y'all's participation and look forward to starting again in January of 2016. So if you need to talk to your legislator, he'll be here on the fourth Friday of each month while they're in session and we look forward to having them back.
And we're always happy to be here to correct what's published in the Tennessean. Always happy to do that.
The media and tends to focus on different things that we'll try to correct if necessary. Thank you very much to Vanderbilt for helping us make this possible. To Newt Danley and the crew from TV3, it's an amazing accommodation to all of us that they're here at 7 o'clock on Friday mornings to make this happen. And to our audience, thanks for being here. We appreciate your participation. Have a good month, and we'll be back here next month on the fourth Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.